Chapter 11. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Auditory Hallucinations Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. As usual, the bookstore's business was dead. All day, there hadn't been a single customer. Ling Pinyin had happily and quietly played games throughout an entire day and night. Finally, when dizziness and blurry vision struck him, he put down his phone. Looking at the newest medal he'd received that was displayed on his phone screen, he felt smug. Tisk, tsk. Ling Pinyin thought to himself haughtily, heroes in the rift are just fodder waiting to be slaughtered. Too easy. Too simple. Too effortless. From the afternoon until the evening, he'd only lost one game. And this was partly because his team had had only 2 DCS, 1, whereas his opponent was hacking, constantly pushing and applying pressure to the lanes that caused the losses. At other times, almost everything they did were one-sided stomps. Thus, soon Ling Pinyin rose into the diamond rank. Rubbing his sore temples, Ling Pinyin grabbed a cup, found the bag of unknown leaves from the drawer, took out a few and made himself a cup of tea. Drinking the fragrant, sweet tea, his whole body's exhaustion and aches and pains were swept away. Ling Pinyin checked out the time on the computer. It was 8:30 a.m. I'm going to do a new chapter today, he said to himself. Next thing you know, he'd sat down at the counter and started typing. The shadow from Han Li's figure rose and fell from between the tall buildings that had long been abandoned. She arrived swiftly at a building that still looked glamorous, which was located in the northern section of the former downtown of Donglin City. On the glass front of the building, the logo of Zhentai Industries still hung. She raised her head and looked up at the 55-story, 160-foot high skyscraper. The ravings by her ears skittered around. The edifice before her had gradually changed its appearance as she was looking at it. The once glorious edifice looked now like a piece of driftwood. The smooth glass exterior which Han Li had thought she was looking at was actually covered with various molds. Han Li walked forward expressionlessly, pushed open the glass door, and entered the building. The lights that still hung in the hall to welcome guests lit up one after another. Then Han Li could hear the sound of sobbing and crying rising from all directions. Gusts of chilling winds blew out of the building toward Han Li, causing her to feel an inexplicable coldness. But she just smiled. Puny ghosts, how dare you be presumptuous toward me? Han Li waved her hands, and the long scarlet whip she had brought with her could be seen in her hands. Clap. The long whip struck the air, giving off a crisp sound. With the sound of the whip, the lights hanging in the hall fell to the ground, one by one. The sound of sobbing and crying disappeared completely. Even the cold winds ceased blowing. But the long whip in Han Li's hand continued to stretch forward. It was as if it had a mind of its own. It seemed to be pursuing something. Finally, the whip found what it had been looking for. Han Li yanked on it and the long scarlet whip returned to her, dragging something in red clothes with long hair covering its face along with it. The ravings by her ears skittered and urged her on. Han Li was struggling. However, in the end, she couldn't resist the exhortations of the noise by her ears. She squatted down and looked at the thing that was still struggling as it was bound by the whip. Its long hair that had seemed to grow from its head was actually covering its whole body. When looked at carefully, it was evident that this thing, in fact, only consisted of red clothes and long hair. Underneath the red clothes and long hair, there was only a cloud of ash-gray gas, which seemed to be shaped like a human. Actually, Han Li could see that even the red clothes and long hair didn't exist. The whole thing was just a cluster of light with a vaguely human shape. Looking at it, Han Li couldn't help but drool. Then, she put out her hand subconsciously, grabbed the thing, and stuffed it into her mouth. Gnaw, gnaw. Han Li's eyes gradually turned red. She looked like a ferocious beast. Vicious and cruel. She munched on the ball of light with gusto as if she was eating the most delicious thing in the world. This was an evil spirit that countless demon hunters had once folded their hands at helplessly. An evil spirit that even the United Nations Security Council couldn't eliminate. To Han Li it had become food. Because this was indeed inherent in it. In the abysmal maw, all ghosts, souls, and earthbound spirits were just food for demons. In essence, demons were an existence that fed on souls. Devouring the red devil spirit completely, Han Li stood up and looked around her. Everything had become completely different once again. The hall that once had been clean and tidy because of the red devil spirit's existence had now turned into a dilapidated place full of dust and cobwebs. Several skeletons were lying scattered around beside the sofa in the hall. Han Li stuck her tongue out and licked her plump, bright lips. Tasty, she commented on the red devil spirit's taste. The red devil spirit, which had been entrenched in this edifice for more than 10 years and had caused much disappointment to countless demon hunters, had now ceased to exist. Elizabeth was now no different from a skeleton. All her flesh and blood had become fuel. She had been converted into a magnificent, powerful piece of machinery guided by the turbulence of her steam turbine. Now, she hauled all the tanks and armored vehicles together, piling them up into a mountain of steel and machinery that looked oddly pleasant and inexplicably logical. The first prototype of the altar of steel had been constructed. The pedrail wheels had become the foundation. The armor served as its outer wall. The turret had been configured into its holy emblem. The engine and generator were powered by icons. Boxes of ammunition and barrels of fuel had been placed in the center of this mountain of steel. More is excellence. Big is beauty. She raised her head and looked at the great altar in front of her, the sacred altar of steel. Her eyes were full of piety and awe. This underground munitions warehouse had been altered beyond recognition. Everything had been transformed. However, Elizabeth lowered her head and looked at the gospel for synthetic beings that she held in her hands. Suddenly, at this moment, this scripture of machinery had flipped into a brand new chapter. One by one, the characters that were made of iron and steel slowly turned into molten metal and flowed into Elizabeth's body, causing her scrawny body to become plump once again. The gospel also made sure to inform her of what she would need to accomplish during the next step in constructing this altar of steel. Only with blood can iron and steel be given a will. She confirmed, only after the infusion of life can the machinery be awakened. Therefore, she was going on a hunt. She needed to hunt down the minions of Diablos and use their blood to water this sacred altar. She had to capture the descendants of Diablos and infuse their lives into her machinery. Almighty Spirit of all machinery. Elizabeth worshipped at the altar in front of her piously. You are one and also the 10,000, the existence and the void. You are the savior of the world and the apocalypse of destruction. You are the steampunk. You are the Buddha of steel. You are the Father, the Blessed Virgin, and the Holy Spirit. May your words travel across all universes and roar in every world like a machine's engine. She stood up and walked out of the warehouse. The 2 laser knives extended from her arms. Flesh and blood were pumped into the steam turbine. The turbine was burning. She was going to take part in a massacre. Sitting at the counter, Ling Pingan's inspiration burst forth like a tide. He had almost finished a chapter of 2,000 words in less than half an hour. All of a sudden, he fell into a trance. All the inspiration came to an abrupt halt. There seemed to be noises in his ears. Vaguely, he thought he was hearing a series of blurry sounds of unknown meaning. This sound resembled that of an engine of a car when it was in the middle of breaking down. However, it also seemed like it was the sound of prayers in Taoist and Buddhist temples. It lasted about 2 seconds at most. Then, the noise vanished completely. Ling Pingan dug his fingers into his ears, F***CK. What is this? I'm having auditory hallucinations at such a crucial moment. Man, looking at the Word document that was already at 1,725 words, he wanted to cry. It was 275 words short. This wasn't a problem that adding water could solve. So, Ling Pinyin stared at the computer and said, "Today's update has probably just gone down the drain. But I didn't upload it yet, so it's not that big a deal. Besides, to be frank, for a terrible author, even if they go back on their promises. So what? Nobody would care at all." Receiving death threats and being forced to update their chapters was a treatment that only great authors would have. As for terrible ones, they were unworthy. He raised his head and looked at the clock. It's only a little past 9 o'clock a.m. Ling Pinyin was surprised. He grabbed his phone. Not playing a few games on such a beautiful day would truly be a disservice to such a gorgeous day. At that, he went into the rift. 1. A DC is a person who has disconnected from a game. Chapter 12. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. An abandoned kitten translator. Nyo.bo studio editor. Nyo.bo studio. After playing 4 or 5 more matches, Ling Pinyin stretched and checked the time. It was almost midnight. He stood up, planning to close the store and go to bed. Suddenly, he heard the sound of meowing. Meow, meow. It sounded really pitiful. Ling Pinyin's conscience would not allow him to ignore a little kitten in distress. After thinking it over for a bit, he opened the door and walked outside. Tonight there was a misty fog hanging over everything. It was so dark in the alley that Ling Pinyin couldn't even see the fingers in front of his face. The kitten's aggrieved meowing sounds were coming from not too far away. Ling Pinyin followed the sound and came upon a kitten, curled up next to the trash can in the street that ran in front of the bookstore. It was hard to see in the fog, but Ling Pinyin could see that its tiny little body looked really dirty. Its fur was a mess, and there seemed to be bloodstains on the fur. It looked scrawny and frail. When it saw Ling Pinyin, fear and caution sprang up in the kitten's amber-colored eyes. Poor little guy, Ling Pinyin's sympathetic nature was awakened as he imagined the story of a kitten who'd just been born and then was placed in the hands of a cruel owner. It had been mercilessly abused every single day and even cruelly tortured. In the end, the kitten, at the brink of death after all the torturing, was ruthlessly abandoned by its owner in the middle of the night. Immediately, Ling Pinyin's heart began to overflow with sympathy. "Don't be afraid, little one," he squatted down and slowly approached the tiny kitten. "I won't hurt you," but the little fella seemed extremely terrified. It curled up small and moved backward. At last, it even hissed at Ling Pinyin and showed its little teeth. This only made Ling Pinyin's sympathy overflow like a flooded river. He gently extended his hands and took the little thing into his arms. But the little fella seemed rather stubborn. Once in Ling Pinyin's arms, it struggled with all its might. "Looks like your master treated you really badly." Ling Pinyin sighed as he gently stroked the kitten's body. The kitten continued to shiver in fear. The fur all over its body seemingly got harder. Poor little thing. Ling Pinyin stroked it and couldn't help but imagine that this kitten probably had such a conditioned reflex due to all the abuse it had received from its previous owner. "Little guy," he stood up with the kitten in his arms and walked back to his house, "You'll stay with me from now on. I have enough fish for you." The Federal Empire contained the Pacific Ocean as their inner lake. From the mainland to the other side of the ocean in the kingdom of Nanzhou, its waves that spanned thousands of miles were the empire's fishing grounds. Therefore, its fish production was extremely high. Also, the price of fish was very cheap in all the markets. Especially sardines and pomfret, which have an annual production rate of millions of tons. Their prices were also really low. Generally, it was possible to buy average fish at 2 per pound. He returned to the store with the nervous kitten in his arms. He placed it on the counter. Then something that Ling Pinyin had never expected occurred. The kitten leaped up from the counter. Ling Pinyin was worried that it would run out and try to escape. However, the kitten walked to the side of the glass door at the store's entrance. As if it had found its home. Its tiny body curled up in a ball in the corner at the side of the door. Its little paws held itself firmly in place as it stuck its pink little tongue out and started licking himself. It was like it was acting like a baby with its mother and being cute in the arms of its owner. Ling Pinyin was dumbfounded as he looked at it. What's the meaning of this? He shook his head. Am I worse than the corner? However, being rational, Ling Pinyin knew that it was ridiculous to be jealous of a corner. Thinking like this, on the contrary, made him feel even more compassionate. Perhaps, he thought, in the past when this little guy was being abused by his previous owner, he would always go find a little corner and hide within its shadows. Over time, it got used to doing this. How pitiful. He walked over, picked up the little fella, and said to it, "Do you like this place? I'm gonna give you a bath, and then we'll come back here, okay?" As he spoke, he carried it upstairs, ignoring how the kitten was struggling. Arriving in the bathroom, he found a small basin and filled it with some warm water. It was strange. According to whatever knowledge Ling Pinyin had about pets, cats should be resistant toward receiving a bath. But this kitten was very quiet in the tub. It only resisted for a brief while when Ling Pinyin was washing it with shampoo. However, it didn't fight that hard. Maybe that was due to the fact that it was too frail. Gradually, the kitten gave up struggling, allowing Ling Pinyin to scrub it in whatever way he wanted to. Swiftly, the bath was over. Ling Pinyin took a clean towel and wrapped it around the wet kitten. Then he dried its fur using a hairdryer. Looking at the kitten once again, he seemed completely different now. Underneath the bathroom lights, there appeared an adorable kitten with a beautiful black coat. Its eyes were bright and amber in color. It had a tiny head that was at most the size of a fist, a few golden whiskers around its mouth, and soft fur that made it really nice to touch. Ling Pinyin lifted it up and looked at it carefully. "Yo." He smiled, "You're a little lady." With the kitten in his arms, he went to the refrigerator, opened it, and took out the sardine that he'd bought a few days before. Then he found a small plate and cut up the sardine on it. "Dig in." Ling Pinyin placed the kitten in front of the plate and encouraged it to eat. Good girl. Unfortunately, not only did the kitten not even look at the sardine on the plate, it backed away. Ling Pinyin couldn't help but scratch his head. He thought of the kitten happily settling in the corner downstairs. So he picked it up, went to the door of his bedroom and placed the kitten behind the door in the corner. Then he offered the plate to her again. However, the kitten still acted very terrified. Ling Pinyin shook his head. With no other option, he carried the kitten downstairs, went to the original corner that the cat had found behind the front door, and put him down again. As expected, as soon as the kitten landed on the ground, it quickly ran to the corner and lay down carefully. Finally, Ling Pinyin once again put the tiny plate with the sardine on it in front of the kitten. This time, it looked at the plate hesitantly, then cautiously stuck its tongue out and tested it, seeming to try and confirm whether the fish was edible. Realizing it was edible, the kitten anxiously pulled the plate close to its chest, placed its tiny little head near the plate, and started to nibble at the sardine carefully and cautiously. Ling Pinyin couldn't help but laugh as he watched its behavior. This little cutie, it seems that she really wants to stay beside this door. He left the kitten to its dinner, went to the entrance, and pulled down the roller door. Then he went back to the counter and shut down the computer. Little fella, Ling Pinyin grabbed his phone, walked to the door, and looked at the kitten who was snuggling up in the corner beside the glass door. Looks like you're planning to sleep there, huh? After some thought, Ling Pinyin went back to the counter, took out a towel from the cupboard behind the counter, then went back to the kitten and placed the towel under it. "Good night," Ling Pinyin said. Subsequently, he turned off the lights in the store and went upstairs. Thud, thud, thud. The wooden stairs creaked and moaned as they always did. In the dead of night, this noise was enough to make people feel terrified. Amid the darkness, the kitten raised its head. It looked around. Within its amber eyes, a space, silent yet strange like an abyss, could be seen. An asphalt dot-like liquid slowly crept from the edges of its eyes. Pairs of peculiar eyes opened and closed. The kitten leaned toward the edge of the glass door. The eyes of the kitten could see an eyeball that was constantly spinning, always staring, or to be more precise, guarding the abyss. Looking at the eyeball, the kitten felt very comfortable. It yawned, lowered its head, lay down on the fuzzy towel, and happily rolled up into a ball. It felt safe and comfortable like never before. Chapter 13. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A call from across the ocean. Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. Holding a bottle of cold sour plum water, Ling Pinyin took a sip. Then he slumped onto the sofa. Been playing games for a whole day, he said to himself. That seems a little inappropriate if I keep this up now. I think I'll watch some videos instead. So he opened a video app and started swiping through video posts. Ling Pinyin was very amused by how funny they were. After watching a few short videos, Ling Pinyin came on some news. At first, he was going to swipe right through it. But just as he was about to delete it, he dismissed the idea. Because this piece of news was from the Kunlun state. As much as Ling Pinyin could remember, the last time Kunlun state had made it into the news was because there had been a civil war in the Republic of South Kunlun 1 year ago. To most people in the Federal Empire, Kunlun state was probably no different than an alien planet. Remote, unfamiliar, barren, primitive. However, those qualities were exactly what incited Ling Pinyin's curiosity about it. According to the Imperial News Agency, at 3 p.m. local time in Kunlun state, the Egyptian Kingdom's Ministry of Home Affairs issued a statement condemning tomb robbers for ransacking the country's oldest pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and stealing one of the most precious funeral objects of Pharaoh Khufu from the pyramid. A golden statue of the cat goddess Batet. It is reported that the cat goddess Batet was the patron saint of ancient Egyptian pharaohs, who prospered in Egypt 1,000 years before the Republican era. Scholars from ancient Dachin once described the scene at the cat goddess temple at that time. On the screen, a statue of the cat goddess appeared. It was a female statue with a cat's head and a human body, which was standing in front of the pharaoh's coffin and his mummy in the pyramid. It is reported that the sabotage at the Great Pyramid of Giza took place a month ago. Listening to this news report and watching the video, Ling Pinyin yawned. Cat goddess Batet. He turned off his phone, went to his bedroom, and lay down on his bed. Interesting. Maybe I can use it in my next novel. As an online author, Ling Pinyin knew that readers always liked to read about anything that was new, that they'd never read about before. Therefore, he was always paying attention to collecting all kinds of information and attempting to broaden his horizons through wide reading. Because an author's job was actually to create dreams. To weave for readers a splendid, magnificent, relaxing, and refreshing dream. Lying on the bed, Ling Pinyin soon fell asleep and had his own dreams. In his dreams, Ling Pinyin saw the kitten that he'd picked up today, curled up in the corner behind the glass door of his bookstore. Some kind of smoke surrounded her body, gradually turning her into a naked, graceful girl. Long black hair covered her whole body. However, among the long hair, her fair skin and her plump pearls could be seen. Have I been reading too much of The Snail Girl? Ling Pinyin laughed at himself in his dream. I can't believe I'm actually having such a dream. When Ling Pinyin woke up, the sun was already shining through the windows on him. He got up, washed his face, and went downstairs. Just as he was about to open the door to the store, he saw the kitten that was still sleeping soundly on the towel he'd laid down in the corner behind the glass door. Ling Pinyin smiled, stepped forward, and picked the kitten up. The kitten was sleeping so soundly that it didn't move at all even when Ling Pinyin took her over to the counter and laid her down. This made Ling Pinyin sigh, poor little thing. He could imagine that this kitten must have been abused so much. Now that it had finally gained a measure of safety, it was able to sleep soundly, maybe for the first time ever. After putting the kitten down, Ling Pinyin opened the bookstore. Aunt Kai's breakfast shop next door was already open. As usual, Ling Pinyin ordered 2 steamed dumplings and a bowl of douhua. After scanning the QR code to pay for it, he happily returned to the store and dug in. When he'd only finished one of the steamed dumplings, his phone rang. Ling Pinyin picked up his phone, had a look at the display, and his face took on a weird expression. Because the screen on his phone showed that the caller was his small aunt. He hesitated for a moment, but then he picked up the call. He changed his expression and said with a smile, "Small aunt, why are you calling me today?" Ling Pinyin, the chilling female voice boomed out from the phone, "You've grown bold, eh? You didn't want to answer my call just now." "Small aunt, this was a misunderstanding," Ling Pinyin hurriedly explained. "I didn't do it on purpose. I was kinda tied up yesterday, so I forgot." "Tied up?" The woman laughed. "Tied up with your games, isn't that right?" Ling Pinyin smiled awkwardly. "I'm impressed by your discernment, small aunt. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm not in the country right now," the woman on the phone said snarkily, "that I would have flown to Jiangqing and given you a beating." "Small aunt, that you're not in the country." Ling Pinyin quickly picked up on the key piece of information. Even his eyebrows looked as if they were about to dance. What he had feared the most was that this living statue of a Buddha would suddenly come to Jiangqing from the capital city. That would have been a literal nightmare. Ever since he had been 10 years old, this woman on the other end of the phone had traumatized him. The woman said, "I'm in Beizhou, things over here have been a little tricky." She continued, "Maybe I'll have to spend another 2 to 3 months here before I can return to the mainland." "Oh," Ling Pinyin hesitated. Then he asked, "Have you discovered any remarkable relics from ancient cities in Beizhou? Or prehistoric artifacts maybe?" His small aunt was a researcher at the Federal Research Institute of Culture and History. Her main job was to study historical relics and ancient cultures from different periods of time. Because of the nature of her work, she was only at home for a few days a year. Every time he asked her where she was or what she was doing, she was either researching or digging things up. He had always thought that what was supposed to have been dug up in Beizhou should have already been dug up. She said, after a seemingly bitter laugh, "Well, I guess. Archaeological discoveries here concerning the Shang dynasty have kind of made some progress." "Oh." Ling Pinyin didn't give it much thought. He said, "Then, I wish you good luck, small aunt." Beizhou Kingdom bordered the east and west coasts of the Shang dynasty. It had only been incorporated into the Federal Empire when the empire had been founded. The Federal Empire had gone to war with foreign nations for more than 100 years in order to incorporate the Beizhou Kingdom into its fold. During the war, Nanzhou and Shizong kingdoms had also been formed. Before the war, the Federal Empire's former emperor and his generals had already warned the entire world that the residents of the southern and northern Shang dynasty were really descendants of the survivors of the Shang dynasty who had been defeated by the Federal Empire 3,000 years ago after crossing the sea. Therefore, these people of the northern and southern Shang dynasty were really citizens of the Federal Empire, and their brothers of the same blood. Therefore, the Federal Empire's war was a righteous one. It was a war to liberate their enslaved, oppressed, and exploited compatriots. Whether others believed it or not, the Federal Empire believed it. After countless bloodshed and fighting on and off for more than 100 years, the Federal Empire used the time of 4 generations to make the whole world accept this fact. Afterwards, the southern and northern parts of the Shang dynasty acquired their proper identity on the world map. However, some recent archaeological discoveries had seemed to indicate that this fact could still be questioned. However, nobody cared. Putting down his phone, Ling Pinyin took a deep breath. He was proud that he had kept his wits about him. At the same time, he became happier. Small aunt isn't in the country. That's awesome. There's no one else who can restrain my free will and unyielding soul around here anymore. As he spoke, he grabbed his phone, preparing to enter the rift. Today, he was going to strive to achieve the legendary Challenger rank. It was now nighttime in the Beizhou Kingdom, which lay on the other side of the ocean. Xianan International Airport was extremely busy. Huge transport aircrafts were taking off on the runway, while countless military aircrafts were landing one after another. In one corner of the airport, a 27-year-old beauty put down her phone. Her eyebrows were knitted in concentration. Very confident, eh? Very well done, Pinyin. I'll settle the score with you when I get back to the mainland. Captain, at this moment, a girl in a Taoist robe with many bells on her hands ran up to the beauty and said with her head slightly bowed, let's go, we need to hurry up. Minister Zhang is waiting for us to assemble. All right. The beauty nodded lightly, closed her phone, and picked up an umbrella that was resting next to her. Opening the umbrella was a revelation as it changed colors constantly like a kaleidoscope, brilliant and eye-catching. Wei. The beauty held the umbrella over the girl in the Taoist robes. They walked close together. What do you think of the young man I introduced you to a few days ago? The girl looked bewildered. He's a very good young man, the beauty smiled and continued, if you marry him, I will take care of you for the rest of my life. The girl still didn't quite understand what the beauty was talking about. She answered gently, Captain, I'm a Taoist nun. So what? The beauty became solemn. Nuns also have to experience the world. How can you forget love if you've never experienced love? The girl sort of understood what the beauty was talking about. She tilted her head and suddenly asked, Captain, then why don't you marry someone? The beauty abruptly altered. Her entire person became like a ferocious beast, making the Taoist nun shudder in fear. Chapter 14 You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Legend of Nightmare Translator. Nyo-i.bo Studio Editor. Nyo-i.bo Studio. Today was destined to be a memorable day for Ling Pinyin. After fighting in the rift for an entire morning, he had finally stepped into the Challenger rank. From now on, he had shed his mortal flesh and become one of the best in the rift. Ling Pinyin was ecstatic. To celebrate, he made himself a fragrant cup of tea. Drinking the aromatic tea, Ling Pinyin felt comfortable from head to toe. He leaned back in the chair and lifted his legs onto the counter. As he sipped on the tea, he muttered to himself, I think I've just lost the fun in the game, all morning. He'd been winning. He had yet to be defeated in a single match. It felt pleasurable when he was actually playing the game, but afterwards Ling Pinyin only felt empty. Now, he was longing for the ups and downs he had had a few days ago in the bronze division. Even though at that time he would lose more than he would win and was a real boob. He often turned into a trash-talker, a flamer, and joined into the verbal warfare himself. He had felt really happy back then. Unlike now. He'd only kept on winning and winning. All his opponents couldn't even get in a hit. All the heroes in the rift acted like pawns who were willingly offering their lives to him. No matter what hero he played or what position he assumed, he could completely stomp the enemy. Especially as the rankings went higher and his teammates couldn't actually keep up with him and play with him, the game became more and more meaningless. Looks like I need some new challenges. The pool of the rift is too small. It can no longer accommodate a top pro like me. So Ling Pinyin grabbed his phone and started searching. What game has the highest difficulty? The results of the search returned mostly stand-alone games. Damned, Phantasmagoria, Stellaris. Ling Pinyin didn't like any of them. Mainly because he couldn't troll people in stand-alone games and has no one to blame when something happens. For Ling Pinyin, such games were too unfriendly. For the same reasons, he didn't like online games either. And they would require the use of real money. Free-to-plays instantly lost their appeal. Hitting a brick wall, Ling Pinyin added a qualifier. What PvP game has the highest difficulty? The answer came back with a bunch of ancient computer games. Dota, LOL, etc. Ling Pinyin couldn't help but sneer. Sitting in front of a computer and playing games will cause spine problems, Ling Pinyin added more qualifiers. What PvP mobile game has the highest difficulty? The answer came back with a bunch of advertisements. Come and hack me if you're my brother. I'm Jia Jia Hui, I'm stronger when I'm green, and yada, yada. In short, it was mostly crappy answers. Until Ling Pinyin came across a comment on WeChat read. Legend of Nightmare is a game that takes life as a gamble. You will not only have to scheme against the enemy, you will also have to guard yourself against your own teammates. It's really, really difficult. Ling Pinyin tapped at the link curiously. After he'd entered, he discovered that this comment had been made by a WeChat Read user with the ID Northern Winds 1 week ago. After the comment was posted, someone finally replied to the comment 3 days later. Someone with the ID I Love Games commented, "Bro, about that Legend of Nightmare you mentioned, why can't I find it on the internet?" Looking at the time, the user with the ID Northern Winds replied in less than a minute, "Bro, this is a secret game. Only people who have been invited can join in. If you're interested, you can drop me a DM." I Love Games hastily responded, "Alright, done." Then, 2 days later, I Love Games left a bunch of emoticons in the comments section of the post. Sad face, grovel on ground, and even priest praying and monk chanting. This had Ling Pinyin puzzled. What game actually uses the invitation system? From the look of it, it seems pretty difficult. Let me try it out then. At the present time, Ling Pinyin's confidence had gotten extremely swollen. Having attained challenger rank in the Rift, he was eager to face more challenges. Hence, he tapped on that ID by the name of Northern Winds and tapped out a message, "Bro, can you invite me to Legend of Nightmare?" In a dark basement, an old computer buzzed. Suddenly, a private message prompt sounded. The person who had been leaning back in a chair in front of the computer hopped up reflexively. He opened the private message immediately and discovered that it was from a WeChat Read user with the ID name of Ling Pinyin. "Bro, can you invite me to Legend of Nightmare?" He smiled and his hairy face became distorted with glee. Yet another sheep has fallen into my trap. This reminded him of the cute new face who'd arrived a few days ago. The smile at the corners of his mouth became even bigger. He quickly clicked on the other party's ID. When he saw that the WeChat user account was authenticated with a real name, he got even happier. This kind of new blood is the nightmare's most desirable sacrifice. As he spoke, he typed tip-tappingly and replied, "Alright." He dragged up a link from the hard disk of this worn-out computer and clicked send. Then he sat up calmly and composedly as he quietly waited for the harvest. A newcomer. In any case, it would provide a few 100-point certificates. If he was lucky, maybe he could even acquire a piece of good novice equipment that would provide him with even more point certificates when he sold it. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but drool. His saliva flowed to the ground, corroding the floor as it sizzled with fumes. The fluorescent light of the broken computer shone on him. He wasn't human. He was a wolf-headed beast, sitting in front of the computer like a human. Ling Pinyin looked at the link that had been sent to the message box of his phone. He hesitated for a moment, but, at last, for the sake of safety, he first activated the antivirus software and then tapped on the link. As soon as he tapped on the link, his phone was quickly directed to the browser page. Subsequently, a page that seemed to be an official website loaded. But seeing the simplicity and the ugliness of the official website, Ling Pinyin couldn't help but frown. There was no game introduction and no top-up channel. There was only a line of bold words in black, "This is the Kingdom of Nightmares and the entrance to hell. Are you ready? Once you step in, you can't look back." Fooling around with a game like this. Ling Pinyin laughed, "Let me test how good you are. If you're not fun, I will report you for illegal operation." Then he tapped on the line of text. The web page diverted once again. One by one, bloody words appeared on the screen. Path into the nightmare is opening. Entering world. The brightness of his phone abruptly surged. At this moment, the kitten, who had been sleeping soundly on the counter, suddenly woke up. Meow. The kitten jumped into Ling Pingan's arms and curled up, trembling. Ling Pingan hurriedly put down his phone and hugged the kitten. Don't be afraid, little fella, don't be afraid. I'm here, no one will ever bully you again. However, little did he know that at this very moment in the eyes of the kitten the entire bookstore seemed like the surface of a lake where a stone has been tossed. Waves were surging, and winds of change were blowing everywhere. Everything had been altered beyond recognition. On the wall where posters had been pasted, something like a leech writhed from inside the wall. Lone eyes opened on the posters. Skittering whispers arose, conveying horrifying things among each other. Inside the bookstore, on the seemingly empty bookshelves, asphalt-like liquid flowed between the books. Pairs of appalling evil eyes opened one after another. Taboo voices echoed in the kitten's ears. Just listening to these voices, the kitten was terrified, and it shuddered in terror. All of wisdom and intelligence had departed from the room. This horrifying bookstore was waking up and taking a different shape. The kitten's instinct was telling him that only in the arms of Ling Pingan could it survive. Hence, with intense horror, the kitten used its 4 tiny paws to tightly grasp onto Ling Pingan's chest, pressing itself into Ling Pingan's body. Ling Pingan looked at the trembling kitten in his arms and couldn't help but sigh. Little fella, just how much trauma did your former master do to you? The sympathetic young man had no choice but to ignore his phone for a while. He picked up the kitten, stood up, and said, "Let's go, little fella, your big brother will take you upstairs to eat some fish." He held the kitten, turned around, and walked to the stairs. At the moment he turned around, the kitten could see something like a cloud of black mist flowing in under the door and floating toward the counter. Then the black cloud of mist turned into small balls of light and surrounded the phone that Ling Pingan had placed on the counter. The kitten quickly shut its eyes. Because it knew that this was taboo. The more it had seen, the faster it would die. 1. Chinese memes made out of funny advertisements, directly translated. Chapter 15. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Realm of Nightmare Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio Thud, thud, thud. The sound of Ling Pingan's footsteps could be heard going up the stairs. On the counter downstairs, the unknown cloud of mist was already pervasive in the air. Balls of light were surrounding the phone on the counter. Within the posters, deep groans like that of whispers gradually intensified. In and out of the bookshelves, the asphalt-like liquid progressively thickened. Octopus-like tentacles began extending outward from the books. Ravings that seemed to come from a bottomless abyss or the endless starry sky echoed from between the books. Finally, the eyeball on the glass door opened. Light undiscernible by the human eye dispersed layer after layer. Brighter than the sun, brighter than all of starlight. The spheres of light surrounding the phone scrambled into the web page on the phone screen. Chu Weiwei opened her eyes. She discovered that she was now in a strange environment. She immediately jumped to her feet. The bell that she wore on her hand was jingling non-stop, but the Taoist robe she was wearing didn't move at all. She turned to look at her surroundings. This place was seemingly a wooden house, narrow and simple. There was a clock on the wall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock's hands moved slowly. In the center of the wooden house, there was an old television set. On the screen, snowflakes kept on flashing. When Chu Weiwei looked toward that old television, lines of text appeared on its screen. Welcome to the realm of nightmare. This is the hall of killing. And also it is a paradise for evolution and adventure. Everyone who enters the realm of nightmare will be given a unique number. Your number is 1-433. When you are in the realm of nightmare, by chanting this number, you will be able to connect with the space. Subconsciously, Chu Weiwei said silently in her heart, 1433. Immediately, an interface similar to that of games she'd played before emerged in front of her. The first tab was the character pane with all the information and data about Chu Weiwei, including age, weight, date of birth, and even her menstrual cycle. Beside the character pane was the mission tab and the item tab. Between them, there was a line of text that said, "When you enter the realm of nightmare or when you're performing missions in the nightmare world, your body will be digitalized." On the character pane, something like a health bar and a mana bar really did appear. Chu Weiwei's frown got deeper. What the H*LL is this place? She mumbled to herself, and how did I end up here? Some memories finally cropped up in her groggy head. So, I came here after I fainted in the office of Beizhou's Ministry of Home Affairs. She remembered that she had seemingly followed her captain to Beizhou's Ministry of Home Affairs. After her captain had left for a meeting, she'd been sitting, playing games on her phone in the office alone. That's right. I was playing a game. Back then, she had downloaded a mobile game by the name of Legend of Nightmare. She had downloaded it from a link that had been sent to her mailbox. Who sent that link? Chu Weiwei thought about this, and she immediately got goosebumps. Because she'd remembered who had sent it. The link was from the intranet. The sender's name was Zhang Yu. A major in Blackguard. A rising star of the Federal Empire. The Blackguard was an organization that was entirely different from other federal agencies. In Blackguard, strength meant respect, and the eminent were made officials. Except for the members of Blackguard who had retired or were retired due to injury, the strength of all the other Blackguard members directly corresponded to their titles. The lowest rank in the Blackguard was sergeant. However, every sergeant in Blackguard possessed the capability to escape a squadron of armed policemen unscathed. Above sergeant was second lieutenant. Second lieutenants in Blackguard wielded the power to face an entire infantry platoon alone. While majors in Blackguard could at least escape a mob consisting of an infantry battalion without a scratch. From joining the Blackguard to becoming a major, it had only taken Zhang Yu a little bit more than 4 years. Hence, he had been hailed as a miracle. The higher-ups of Blackguard in the capital even thought that he might be promoted to the rank of general in the future, getting the opportunity to be in the presence of His Majesty the Emperor and be bestowed the title by the Emperor himself. You woke up, a deep male voice came from behind her. Chu Weiwei turned around and saw a young man in a black uniform gradually taking shape in her sight. It was Zhang Yu, Deputy Director of the Guangnan branch of the Federal Empire's Blackguard. A major who overlooked an entire region. A living person who could match up to 10,000 enemies. Zhang Yu shook hands with Chu Weiwei like a gentleman. We meet again, Miss Chu. Major Zhang. Chu Weiwei looked at Zhang Yu with a curious expression. Shouldn't you be on the mainland? Ha, ha, Zhang Yu chuckled, I am on the mainland, and the almighty realm of nightmare can traverse space, so, here we meet again. As he spoke, Zhang Yu once again kowtowed. Major Zhang, what's the meaning of this? Chu Weiwei was on guard. She'd been born to the top family in the art of Taoism in the Federal Empire, the Chu family on Qingqing Mountain. Her ancestor, Chu Ming, was a general who had served the founding emperor of the Federal Empire. Chu Ming had 3 sons. His youngest son, Chu Feng, adored the art of Taoism from the time when he was young and had hence become a disciple of Grand Master Zhang on Dragon Tiger Mountain. During the reign of Emperor Taizong, spirit aura recovered, foreign species emerged, and demons became rampant. Emperor Taizong recalled Chu Feng and ordered him to create the Blackguard. He became the Blackguard's first governor. Chu Feng had lived in seclusion on Qingqing Mountain in his autumn years, and the Chu family had taken root there ever since. For more than 200 years, the Chu family had always stood firm. They were at the top in terms of wealth in the Federal Empire. During their peak, the Chu family had 7 lords in their clan and 3 generals from each sub-family unit. Today, although the Chu family was no longer as strong as it had been back then, they were still some of the few top wealthy aristocrats who had lasted from the founding of the country to the present. Naturally, since childhood, Chu Weiwei had had to participate in various social activities. Hence, she had met Zhang Yu a few times. But she really couldn't understand what exactly was going on now. "Why don't you speak your number again, Miss Chu?" Zhang Yu said with a smile. "He will give you the answer." Chu Weiwei looked hesitant. Zhang Yu smiled as if he had already known the answer a long time ago. Of course, he might actually not care about this at all. He sat down on a broken sofa, crossed his legs, and said while looking at Chu Weiwei's beautiful face, "Miss Chu, you don't have to think about using the blackguard's communication talisman to report to the blackguard. The splendor of the realm of nightmare isn't something you can fathom. Here, all props and techniques are restricted." Chu Weiwei let go of her hand, and a communication talisman that had been hidden in her hand fell to the ground. Indeed, as Zhang Yu said, here in this strange place, the communication talisman customized by Blackguard had no ability to transmit communication signals at all. Chapter 16. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Evil Eye Translator. Nyo-i.bo Studio Editor. Nyo-i.bo Studio. Chu Weiwei loosened her grip and the communication talisman that she had been holding in her hand fell to the ground. Indeed, as Zhang Yu had said, here, in this strange place, the communication talisman customized by the Blackguard had no ability to transmit communication signals at all. "Miss Chu, I remember that when we met last time you asked me a question," Zhang Yu said in a gentle voice. "How did I rise up from a mere blackguard sergeant to what I am today in just 4 years? Now, Miss Chu, I can tell you the answer." He spread his arms wide to encompass their surroundings. "It is because of this very place, the almighty realm of nightmare. Over the past 4 years, I have braved untold dangers for the realm and have thus been rewarded by it. With powerful bloodlines, unparalleled techniques, peerless magic weapons. The realm of nightmare has everything that you could ever imagine. As long as you complete the missions and gain point certificates, you can redeem them all. Miss Chu, you may chant your number silently in your heart, then navigate to redeem your point certificates, and you will know that what I've just said is true." With a little qualm, Chu Weiwei recited her number silently in her heart, 1433. Once again, a pane appeared. Then she chanted, "Redeem." An interface similar to that of an in-game auction house appeared before her eyes. The interface was divided into 3 sections. Bloodline region, spell region, and item region. Navigating to the bloodline region, names of multitudes of bloodlines came into sight. Qiongqi, Taotai, Yingzhao, Yinglong, the names of various demons from myths and legends appeared. Chu Weiwei tried to tap on the Yinglong option. In answer, there arose a line of text. "Insufficient point certificates. The Yinglong bloodline requires 750,000 certificates. You have 0 certificates. How's that?" Zhang Yu looked at Chu Weiwei, who seemed to be in shock, and laughed. "I wasn't lying to you. The almighty realm of nightmare truly is omnipotent, isn't it?" Chu Weiwei took a deep breath and asked, "Is this all real?" "Of course." Zhang Yu smiled. "Otherwise, how could I possibly have been promoted from a mere sergeant to a major in just 4 years? Besides," he twisted around to face her, "to be honest with you, Miss Chu, my capabilities are already at the level of a lieutenant colonel. What's more, as soon as I complete another 2 or 3 missions in the realm of nightmare, my powers will be close to those of a colonel. In the Blackguard, the higher one's rank, the stronger their powers. Especially for the rank of major and above. The disparity between the power levels couldn't be exaggerated. Lieutenant colonels possessed the power to annihilate a mechanized infantry regiment. As for colonels, they might wield enough power to raise a small country all by themselves. As powerful as the Federal Empire was, the title of colonel had only been given to some 110 people. In the Beizhou kingdom, there were no more than 5 blackguard colonels. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 5 years to go from major to lieutenant and at least 10 years to go from lieutenant colonel to colonel. However, Zhang Yu claimed that his strength was already on a par with lieutenant colonels, and that he only needed to accomplish 2 to 3 more missions before his powers could rise to those of colonels. If they were anywhere else, Chu Weiwei would never have believed that for all the tea in China. But in this strange and peculiar place, she felt she almost believed it. It was just that. Since you're already so powerful, Major Zhang, Chu Weiwei looked at him and asked, that what was your purpose in bringing me to this place? Aren't you afraid that I might expose you to the higher-ups? A lieutenant colonel definitely was powerful. But before the Federation, he was still a mere ant. Despite his rank, before the enormous Federal Empire, he was no more than an employee who had relatively high importance. No matter how powerful a person was, would he still be alive and kicking after being struck by a hydrogen bomb? Not to mention the railguns called Heavenly Punishment that could be deployed. Zhang Yu grinned. He stood up. His head started twisting faster and faster and his skull gradually became more and more distorted through all the twisting. That's because, his head slowly turned into that of a massive tiger. The tiger's mouth opened, revealing its densely packed fangs. That I can't contain my urge to eat people much longer. Miss Chu, the tiger's head spoke with a human voice, that I need the principium of Tao that has been passed down in your family in order to suppress my evil thoughts and preserve my sanity. Upon entering the realm of nightmare for the first time, he had struck the jackpot and acquired a small amount of Lu Wu's residual blood. Since then, he'd accomplished his swift rise and had grown from a mere sergeant to a giant who was equivalent to a major in the blackguard in just over 4 years. However, this mode of achievement had contained hidden dangers. In the realm of nightmare, Lu Wu's bloodline had been classified as a divine-level bloodline. On the exchange, it would require 880,000 point certificates. Zhang Yu had not acquired it in the exchange, however. He had enhanced the small amount of Lu Wu's blood that he had been able to acquire from this nightmare world and, hence, this had led to the loss of its divinity and the rise of its demonic nature. Over time, its demonic nature had continued to grow. Therefore, not only did Zhang Yu not grow into being a Lu Wu. On the contrary, he had constantly plummeted, slipping down toward the path of demons. Now, he was finding it difficult even to suppress his inner cannibalistic desires and bloodthirsty impulses. Therefore, Zhang Yu had expended a large amount of points and inquired about a solution from the realm of nightmare. After excluding several obviously impossible options, the Principium of Tao, which was held in the Chu family's hands, became his best choice to achieve success. As for the Federal Empire, fear revealed itself within the tiger's eyes. Miss Chu, I'm afraid that you're unaware of what has been going on. Anyone who attempts to leak information about the realm of nightmare and the nightmare worlds will inevitably be slaughtered by the realm. Zhang Yu bent over to the ground and slowly transformed into a huge tiger. Its body was the size of a rhinoceros. It left Chu Weiwei gasping for breath. You are the tiger demon. Chu Weiwei shouted, you are the tiger demon. During the past 2 years, the blackguard had suffered multiple cases of demon attacks in Guangnan. There had even been a case where a captain of the blackguard had been attacked and killed during an investigation. As the demon that had attacked this captain from the blackguard had left huge tiger paw prints at the scene of this crime and at other crime scenes, the perpetrator had been named the tiger demon in the blackguard's files and was listed in the Federal Empire's Tier B as a most wanted criminal. The Federal Empire had even dispatched a major general to investigate this issue in Guangnan. However, the investigation had come up with nothing. As if it had vanished amid a vast sea of people, the tiger demon had disappeared without a trace. Now, the situation had finally come to light for Chu Weiwei. The tiger demon had never disappeared. It had always been there, right over there in Guangnan. What was more, it was in the deputy director of the blackguard's Guangnan branch. I'm glad you finally understand, Miss Chu, the tiger spoke as it drooled and growled at the same time. From within its body, figures of humans came walking out. There were males and females, old and young. Their numbers increased by the minute. Soon, these figures surrounded Chu Weiwei like puppets. Miss Chu, if you refuse to hand over the Principium of Tao to me, the ferocious tiger wagged its tail. That I will be forced to turn you into one of these ghosts in my possession. And, when that happens, I will be able to acquire the Principium of Tao that you have. This was where his dilemma lay. Luwu had originally been a mythological animal with a human face, but all he had been able to obtain from the nightmare world was just a little bit of Luwu's blood. Therefore, as he grew, he did not evolve into Luwu. Instead, he continuously slid toward the demonic path, becoming the man-eating tiger demon. Biao. Biao devours humans and claims their souls as his own. He might seem powerful, but, in fact, he had lost all hope for any further progression. Moreover, once he had completely descended into being Biao, Zhang Yu knew that only death would await him. His choice was either to perish in the realm of nightmare or be slaughtered by generals of the Federal Empire, each one of whom was equivalent to being a one-man army. A major general of the Federal Empire's blackguard was equivalent to an army group all by himself. What's more, there were at least 10 of these in existence in the Federal Empire. These men could clap him to death with one single slap. Not to mention, there was still the living deity, who was so unimaginably powerful that even the realm of nightmare was afraid of it. Chu Weiwei looked at the human figure in front of her, and then she looked at Zhang Yu who had turned into a ferocious tiger. Suddenly, she laughed. Major Zhang, you are trying to fool with me. Zhang Yu's expression changed drastically as he listened to her. Chu Weiwei had already chanted her number in her heart, so she now inquired of the realm of nightmare if fighting was allowed in the realm. A line of text immediately appeared before her. When you are in the realm of nightmare, no damage will be inflicted upon you. Note. Unless you violate the rules of the realm. Zhang Yu knew that he had failed to fool her. But instead of being anxious, he laughed, you are one smart cookie, Miss Chu. However, as a newcomer, Miss Chu, your first mission in the nightmare realm must be completed with the accompaniment of the inviter. And I was your inviter, Miss Chu. In the nightmare world. He reverted to human form, and all those human figure that resembled ghosts quickly disappeared. He politely kowtowed. All I need is to pay a price, and I will be able to. He licked his lips. Devour you. Chu Weiwei hurriedly recited her number in her heart, made an inquiry, and got the answer that sent chills all over her body. It was true. In the first nightmare adventure for newcomers in the realm of nightmare, they had to be supervised and protected by their inviter. The inviter, on the other hand, could pay a price to the realm of nightmare to dissolve the relationship between the two. Then, there was no need for further elaboration. At this moment, another figure appeared in the wooden cabin. It was a man with a wolf's head. When he saw Zhang Yu, he took a few steps backward, then immediately made a deep bow. Lord Tiger, you're here as well, what's the matter, little wolfie? Are you here to kill another newcomer to feed the pigs? Zhang Yu asked. Ha, ha, the man laughed, bowed his head, and started acting as if he were fawning over the tiger. Anything to make a living, am I right? He looked at Zhang Yu and Chu Weiwei and said, since you're here, Lord Tiger, I shall not participate in becoming a novice instructor at this time. As he spoke, he was seemingly trying to activate some kind of ability to leave. His entire person gradually became illusory. Zhang Yu looked at him with great satisfaction. However, at that moment, his already illusory figure solidified once again. Zhang Yu's expression altered. He was about to be enraged, thinking that the wolf was going back on his words. However, before he could speak, he heard skittering voices in his ears. It was like whispers in a nightmare coming from a ghoul. In pursuit of the sound, he raised his head and saw balls of light falling from the ceiling. These balls of light fell to the ground, turning into a cloud of unknown fog that resembled ashes. As soon as the unknown fog reached the ground, it began squirming. To the naked eye, its wriggling was incredibly slow, but, strangely, this sluggish squirming hastily formed a cyan-colored stone pedestal. The stone pedestal quickly grew larger. Soon, it occupied most of the space in the wooden house. The top of the pedestal reached the roof. A door appeared in the pedestal. An eye that belonged to one that was evidently up to no good due to its extreme depravity slowly opened the door. At the moment when the eye opened, Zhang Yu, the young man with a wolf's head, and Chu Weiwei all felt chills all over their bodies. It was as if the blood in their bodies had been frozen. They couldn't even breathe. The even deadlier thing was, that just by looking at it, everyone felt as if they had gone through a storm in their souls. Their wisdom was lost, their minds were frozen, and their spirits were rapidly racing toward collapse. Chapter 17. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A Change of Rules Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. When the evil eye on the pedestal opened, time seemed to stand still. In an instant, Chu Weiwei, Zhang Yu, and the young man with the head of a wolf all felt as if they were on the verge of a mental breakdown. At the moment they looked into the evil eye, unimaginable amounts of taboo knowledge and maniacal thoughts poured directly into their brains. It was as if the sluice gates had been opened to release floodwaters. Multitudes of terrifying ravings and deranged thoughts reverberated in their ears and in their brains. Zhang Yu was the first to crumble. In less than 1 second, his body started to become deformed. Masses of flesh and blood started peeling off his body. Watching this horror, Chu Weiwei and the young man wearing the wolf's head had to see piles of flesh fall to the ground and start wriggling as if they were still alive. Strange mouths opened up in the masses of flesh. They were singing an eerie, yet magnificent, carol. This carol was being chanted in a language that could not be understood or recognized. However, just by listening to it, Chu Weiwei felt as if countless ants were crawling between her skin and her flesh. Her skin, flesh, and bones started pulsating listening to this carol. Chu Weiwei had a feeling that her own skin, flesh, and bones wanted to join Zhang Yu's piles of flesh and sing praises along with them. And she soon knew that her feeling was correct. Because the flesh and blood of the youth with the head of the wolf also began to peel off. In the same manner, odd-looking mouths grew on his flesh that had fallen to the ground, wriggling as they chanted the hymn that was peculiar yet full of grandeur. Like the friction between metals, like the echoes of a nightmare. As she listened to it, Chu Weiwei could hardly restrain the madness of her body. Her skin began to tear. Her flesh started squirming. Her bones and internal organs were thumping frantically. Each of her cells was screaming in madness about their desire to join this choir of insanity. This completely annihilated Chu Weiwei's spirit. Then, at the moment when she was about to crumble, a sachet that hung at her waist fell off due of the vigorous shaking of her body. A note slipped out of the sachet. Clack, clack, the evil eye on the pedestal abruptly dimmed. The cloud of unknown mist turned into something like an arm and held up the piece of paper. The evil eye lowered its gaze slightly and saw the text on the note. Ling Pingyuan, ID Ling. Opening the door of the fridge, Ling Pingyuan grabbed a few chilled sardines, placed them on a small clean plate, and brought them to the kitten. He comforted the kitten to soothe her emotions while urging her softly, "Have a bite. Good kitty." Under his comforting words and touch, the kitten gradually calmed down. But she didn't seem to like sardines very much. After smelling them and probing them with her paws, finally, under Ling Pingyuan's repeated urgings, she carefully stuck out her pink tongue, licked the sardines on the plate, and then carefully put them into her mouth and nibbled. It was apparent that the kitten obviously didn't want to eat the fish. It was as if the sardines tasted awful, and she was only eating them reluctantly for Ling Pingyuan's sake. Ling Pingyuan scratched his head as he looked at her. I've actually found a kitten who doesn't like fish. He said, I'll buy you some cat food later then. As the kitten listened to him, the speed of her munching on the fish evidently hastened. This made Ling Pingyan happy. Good girl. I'll get you the best cat food. Staying with the kitten until she'd finished the sardines on the plate, Ling Pingyan picked up the little fella and turned her around to really look at her. It was only now that he realized that this kitten was really beautiful. Her black coat was soft and smooth, very comfortable to the touch. Her tiny head was as adorable as those pets in cartoons. And her pair of big amber eyes were shining with an unparalleled glow. More important, this little fella seemed to be very shy. When Ling Pingyan reached out his hand to tickle her chin, she actually tried to avoid his hands. Ha, ha. Looking at this adorable kitten, he couldn't contain his desire to have some fun with her. He carried her over to the sofa and began teasing her. After teasing her for a while, Ling Pingyan remembered something. Oh, yeah. I haven't given you a name yet. He grabbed the kitten's 2 front paws and tickled them. He stared at her and immediately had an idea. How about I give you a foreign name? Recalling the piece of news he'd stumbled upon last night, he held the kitten up in front of his face. I'll call you Batet. Cat Goddess Batet. The foreign national treasure mentioned in the news that had been stolen was a statue of a goddess with a human body and a cat's head. Ling Pingyan felt that the image and temperament of this kitten seemed identical to her. Suddenly, the kitten he was holding meowed very spiritedly. Meow. Ling Pingyan smiled immediately. All right. It is decided then. In the capital city of Beizhou, in the Xianan prefecture, the rolling Xian River was rushing forward. In a skyscraper that was situated by the river's banks, Chu Weiwei opened her eyes abruptly. She panted in horror and slumped from her chair to the ground. Memories returned to her bit by bit. An unfamiliar place, a strange log cabin, tiger demon Zhangyu, wolf-headed youth, the so-called realm of nightmare. And the unknown cold of smoky fog, the spooky door on the stone pedestal that raised up in the room of the log cabin, and the evil eye that opened on the door. Did I? Chu Weiwei tried to remember. In the end, her spirit had collapsed, and both her mind and her body had been distorted by madness. But now, she looked at her hands as she felt her own body. Nothing felt strange at all. Was it a dream? Chu Weiwei wondered. She stood up cautiously and looked at the desk in front of her and the phone on the desk. On the phone screen, the link that she had tapped on had disappeared. However, on the phone screen, there was a new app that had appeared. An eerie evil eye that was closed. There were some words underneath the evil eye. Legend of Nightmare. Chu Weiwei was so scared that she backed away from her phone and was about to call the guards. All of a sudden, lines of text appeared on her retina. Warning. Warning. 1433, you are trying to violate the rules of the realm of nightmare. These texts suddenly distorted and turned into scrambled codes. It was as if somebody had been rubbing them off with an eraser. The characters vanished one after another. Then a new line of text emerged on her retina. The Great One has descended into the realm of nightmare. Because of the Great One, rules of the realm of nightmare and the nightmare worlds will be adjusted. 1. All participants in the nightmare worlds will now acquire a brand new and unique mark of nightmare. This mark will replace your number, become the method for you to contact the realm of nightmare, and provide you certain auxiliary functions when you are having an adventure in a nightmare world. 2. Increased mission types in nightmare worlds. From now on, the realm of nightmare will establish main mission lines in all nightmare worlds. Completing main mission lines will grant you massive amounts of point certificates. 3. In some unique nightmare worlds, there will be special missions and characters. 4. From now on, the punishment of execution for revealing the existence of the realm of nightmare and nightmare worlds has been abolished. However, every word concerning the realm of nightmare and the nightmare worlds that you try to reveal to the outer world will be blocked by the Great One. 5. The Great One will forever be loyal to corrupted character, corrupted character, corrupted character, corrupted character. Chapter 18. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fear Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. Soon the last corrupted character appeared on her iris. Then all these words faded, one after another. The next second, Chu Weiwei felt a burning sensation on her wrist. Looking down, she discovered the faint mark of a closed eye had appeared on her left wrist. She touched the mark. Abruptly, a magnificent voice sounded in her ears, "Welcome, adventurer in the game of Legend of Nightmare. From now on, you should give yourself a unique nightmare name. This name will become your code name in the realm of nightmare. You can give yourself a nightmare code name by chanting your desired name in silence. If you don't give yourself a code name, the realm will use your real name. The countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, unable to think fast enough, Chu Weiwei quickly said silently, "Pretty Weiwei." This was her nickname on the internet. Naming is a success. The magnificent voice continued, "From now on, 1433, your nightmare name shall be Pretty Weiwei. This name wields priority in the domain. Before your death or before you completely exit the realm of nightmare, the name will be made unavailable to all other players in the game of Legend of Nightmare." The mark on her wrist tingled. Chu Weiwei lowered her head and saw a word written in ancient text appearing beside the mark. It was the nightmare name that she had just given herself. Pretty Weiwei. She breathed a sigh of relief. Then she thought of Zhang Yu. After hesitating for a little while, Chu Weiwei picked up her phone and logged onto the blackguard's intranet. Then she navigated to the local intelligence network. Upon logging in, a pop-up window appeared at the bottom of Chu Weiwei's phone screen. It was an emergency notification that would only appear when the blackguard had discovered a major incident. Looking at the information in the pop-up window, Chu Weiwei slumped down onto her chair feebly. Because what the pop-up window said was, "Deputy Director of the blackguard's Guangnan branch, Major Zhang Yu, has been found mutilated." Underneath was a photo. The photo showed the massive figure of a badly mutilated tiger. Weiwei, her door opened. Her captain's figure appeared in the doorway. "Hurry up, something big has happened. Zhang Yu, the deputy director of the local Guangnan branch, has died after having been found mutilated in the basement of his private house. From his corpse, they found evidence that he was the tiger demon. This is a massive case, bigger than anything that the Federation has encountered in over 100 years. A man-eating demon worming its way into the blackguard. I'm afraid that the governor is really going to be pissed off this time." The blackguard's governor went by the surname Li. Nobody was aware of his full name. Only a few people had ever seen him. However, the whole world knew that the governor of the Federal Empire's blackguard wasn't someone they could afford to mess with. Because his existence itself was a synonym for the word invincible. Chu Weiwei seemed a little distracted as she listened to her captain. Holding the kitten, Ling Pingyan walked downstairs. It was almost noon. On the street outside the door, the sun was scorching. Aside from some occasional passing vehicles, there was no one at all walking around. Ling Pingyan had already gotten used to this a very long time ago. He held the kitten, walked to the counter, sat down, and put the kitten aside. Then he saw the screen on his phone. It appeared to have been turned off. He picked it up, unlocked it, swiped it open, only to find the icon of a brand-new application appearing on the screen. Underneath the icon of a closed eye, there were the words, "Legend of Nightmare." Ling Pingyan was surprised. "It's downloaded already. Did I download it?" He scratched his head. But he didn't really care about such trivial problems. He grabbed his phone and thought, since it's already downloaded, I'll give it a go. I can just uninstall it if it sucks. Then I'll call the Federal Authority of Electronic Games to make a report. I'm a law-abiding citizen after all. Ling Pinyin thought to himself as he tapped on the icon. However, the game didn't load. Instead, a message popped up. Dear Nightmare Adventurer, there are still 24 hours until the next nightmare. Please be patient until the nightmare world opens. A countdown appeared under the icon. 23.59.59, yo. Ling Pinyin chuckled. This game has some character. I'll wait for one day then. He raised his head and looked at the clock. The time now was 12:25 in the afternoon. He took note of the time. If tomorrow, this so-called game turned out to be suckish. Ha. Ling Pinyin licked his lips. I will let the developers know why roses are red and violets are blue. Chu Weiwei followed her captain through the many corridors of the Beizhou Kingdom's Ministry of Home Affairs. All of a sudden, she felt the mark on her wrist heating up. She lowered her head and saw a countdown appearing underneath the mark. 23.59.59, what's wrong, Weiwei? Her captain turned around and looked at her. Nothing, Chu Weiwei blushed. She wasn't all that good at telling lies. Fortunately, her captain didn't seem to care. She only nodded, remember, tell me if there's anything I can help you with. Okay, thanks. Chu Weiwei nodded her head. She had now confirmed one thing. She was the only one who could see this so-called mark of nightmare on her wrist. This made her feel agitated. Because that would imply that the realm of nightmare had powers that were far beyond her understanding. This power could seemingly distort and tamper with the rules of the world at will. She couldn't help but think about Zhang Yu, the tiger demon who had been determined to have died of unknown causes. Zhang Yu himself had said that he had the capability of a lieutenant colonel. What's more, he'd said that he only needed to go through another 2 to 3 levels to reach colonel. While she was just a mere lieutenant in the blackguard. Now, Zhang Yu was dead. His body had been discovered in the basement of his private dwelling. According to the blackguard's report, someone had found that the major's apartment had collapsed, and the local blackguards had hurried to his rescue. In the end, Zhang Yu, who had turned into a massive tiger, was found in the basement. Through DNA comparison, it had been confirmed that the tiger demon was the former deputy director of the blackguard's Guangnan branch, Major Zhang Yu. So, how did I survive? Chu Weiwei kept asking herself this question. She thought of the balls of light that had fallen from the ceiling of the log cabin. She thought of the unknown fog formed by the balls of light after they reached the ground. She also thought of the stone pedestal, the door on it that appeared out of nowhere, and the evil eye on the door that opened. She even thought of herself witnessing the masses of flesh and blood peeling off from Zhang Yu and the wolf-headed young man's bodies. The spooky mouths that were singing an inexplicable hymn. Just thinking about it, Chu Weiwei's body couldn't help but shudder. She was completely oblivious about how she had survived that terrifying and strange occasion. She'd almost forgotten everything that had happened. Aside from fear, everything else that had happened had been obliterated from Chu Weiwei's mind. This made her feel even more terrified. The source of fear was the unknown. Chapter 19. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A terrifying kitten translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. Since he couldn't play the new game he'd downloaded, Ling Pinyin turned on the television to pass the time. As soon as the television was turned on, a news report appeared. Ling Pinyin was about to switch channels. He picked up the remote control, but halted immediately. Because the news that was being broadcast was from Jiangqing City. According to a report we've just received, half an hour ago, a building collapsed in the northern suburbs of Jiangqing City. A private apartment building collapsed for still unknown reasons. At present, firefighters from Jiangqing City's fire department are conducting an emergency rescue at the scene. The female announcer who was dressed in formal clothes reported in a sweet voice, according to our sources from the Jiangqing City Federal Rescue Center, this collapsed apartment belongs to Zhang Yu, deputy director of the Jiangqing City Federal Bureau of Natural Disaster Management. It can also be confirmed that Zhang Yu was unfortunately killed in this accident. A picture of a man who seemed a little bit too young for the title he had achieved appeared on the screen. As he looked at it, Ling Pingyan couldn't help commenting, "This Zhang Yu guy is at most 1 or 2 years older than I am, and he's already a deputy director in Jiangqing City." However, the next second, he stopped commenting. Because the biography of Deputy Director Zhang appeared on the screen. The title Natural Disaster and Rescue Expert appeared in bold type with a large font size. The Federal Empire valued knowledge highly and was especially respectful toward its experts. There was a famous saying from the founder of the Federal Empire that was often flung around. "Let the experts do things." This very sentence had become the fundamental foundation of the Federal Empire's national policies for the past 300 years. From the top of society to the bottom, there was a national consensus about respecting professionalism and various experts. So, of course, Ling Pingyan's previous skeptical comments naturally became more sympathetic. What a pity, he was so young. How very unfortunate. However, this matter didn't occupy too much of Ling Pingyan's thoughts. Because his stomach had started rumbling. Grabbing his phone and swiping into the takeaway app, Ling Pingyan ordered a beef donburi as usual. Half an hour later, the beautiful girl in traditional Fusang clothes once again arrived at his store on her electric bike. "Ling-san, your beef donburi." As soon as Chiba Michiko entered, she bowed politely as usual and then placed the food box that was in a plastic bag on the counter. "All right, thank you." Ling Pingyan nodded. Then he remembered that this young girl from Fusang seemed to be addicted to cosplay. That tail behind her hip was so cute. She is really brave. Ling Pingyan gasped to himself in admiration. He felt that if it were him, no matter how much he might want to, he wouldn't have dared to openly exhibit his hobbies to the public's pointing fingers. Chiba Michiko placed the takeaway food box neatly, before she saw the black kitten lying prone on the counter. Tiny kittens were a deadly enticement for all girls. What's more, this kitten was a petite and adorable one. Chiba Michiko fell in love with this kitten instantly. "Ling-san," with big curious eyes, she asked, "Is this your new pet?" "Yeah." Ling Pingyan took the food box, opened it, and the aroma of beef immediately filled his mouth and nose, compelling him to grab the chopsticks and dig in. "This little fella has gone through quite a lot," he briefly explained about what had happened last night, leaving Chiba Michiko a little teary. She cautiously walked up to the counter, looked at the kitten sleeping next to the computer, and couldn't help reaching out her hand to touch its fur. But before she could touch her, the kitten suddenly raised her head. Its eyes were a magnificent amber color that was surpassingly beautiful. Chiba Michiko took her hand away immediately, and she backed away as if she had been shocked by electricity. A look of fear and terror cropped up on her face. Seeming to hesitate, she finally mustered up her courage and spoke, "Ling-san, your cat." She looked at the kitten that had once again placed its head down and asked courageously, "Is it obedient?" "Yeah, very." Ling Pingyan was eating his beef donburi as he replied, "I even gave her a name. Batet. What do you think? It's a great name, isn't it?" Ling Pingyan asked. "Yes." Chiba Michiko's voice seemed to tremble, and, at that moment, the kitten who had just put its head down raised its head again. Its black fur stood up. Its tiny mouth opened slightly, exposing her pink tongue and her mouthful of teeth. As if she had encountered her natural enemy, Chiba Michiko started shaking all over. Exerting all her strength, she nodded forcefully. "Yes, it's a really nice name." She was afraid to say any different. Because she knew that if she was bold enough to do so, she would die. "Ling-san, good. Bye." Chiba Michiko dared not linger any longer. She bowed and said, "Enjoy your meal." Then she walked out of the bookstore in a way that seemed as if she was running for her life. Ling Pingyan was busy inhaling the beef donburi, so he didn't look up. He just nodded and said, "Thanks for your hard work, Chiba-chan. I'll remember to give you 5 stars. After escaping the bookstore, Chiba Michiko patted herself on the chest. That was scary, that was too scary, she couldn't help but keep repeating that phrase. She turned back to look at the bookstore. At the counter behind the glass door, the young owner of the bookstore was gorging on his food as if he had no idea of what was going on. And sitting on the counter, a pair of amber cat eyes was following her. As if in a trance, Chiba Michiko seemed to catch sight of a pyramid's image reflected behind the kitten. Chiba Michiko abruptly shuddered. That was a warning that couldn't get any more obvious. But Ling-san is a good person. Thinking about the encounters she had had with this young man from the Federal Empire over the past 2 years or so, Chiba Michiko was reluctant to not trust him. She took out her phone and was about to dial the emergency number that had been left behind by the Federal blackguard. But the next second, she stopped. Because she saw the kitten lowering her head once again and curling up on the counter. It doesn't seem to bear any ill intention toward Ling-san, Chiba Michiko thought. Maybe like Bai Sujin on television, it is here to repay its debt of gratitude. Perhaps only this explanation would make any sense. Chiba Michiko doesn't want to be Fahai, one. And she couldn't be, even if she wished to. She was just a little fox demon, a poor little fox demon who had come to the Federal Empire from Fusang in order to make a living. She understood that the kitten was very, very powerful. It was so powerful that perhaps no one in Jiangqing could match it. At least, whoever tried to take it on would need backup from the capital city. However, if it was angered before backup from the capital city could arrive, Jiangqing City would suffer flooding just like that which occurred at the Jinshan Temple, too. Thinking of the picture of the flooding of Jinshan Temple that she had seen on television, the girl from Fusang shuddered again. She didn't want this city that she had become familiar with to become like Osaka a few years ago. In Osaka, where the earth split, the city burned, and people fled in panic. 1. Fahai. A Buddhist monk from Madame Whitesnake, aka Bai Sujin. 2. Another reference to an incident that took place in Madame Whitesnake. Chapter 20. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Blackguard Translator. Nyo Iwo Studio Editor. Nyo Iwo Studio Situ. He stood on the peak of the mountain gazing at the collapsed villa below. Situ, do you see anything? Xia Ping of the Blackguard inquired. Situ. He shook his head. A tinge of melancholy flashed through his eyes that seemed as aggressive as those of a tiger. Something like this happening, he said, that the governor is really pissed off. Xia Ping immediately bowed to the ground. I'm at fault. The governor of the Blackguard held a lofty status among the blackguards. In a sense, he was their spiritual mentor and the symbol of strength for all of them. No need for you to apologize. Situ. He raised his hand. Zhang Yu had hidden himself so deeply. Neither you, nor even I, ever suspected anything. The tiger demon had actually been a blackguard. Who from the top to the bottom of the blackguards could possibly have predicted something like that? It was important to know that to be selected to the blackguards individuals had to pass a trial. Their ancestors, up to 3 generations back, would be thoroughly researched by the investigative agency. Their blood would also be drawn and kept as a sample to ensure that every newcomer entering Blackguard was safe from disease. Thus, Zhang Yu becoming a tiger demon must have occurred after he joined the Blackguard. For the Blackguard, this had become an unprecedented challenge. Before this, there had never been a case of a human turning into a demon in the Blackguard. Be prepared, Situ. He said to Xia Ping, that I'm going to go have a look myself. Especially in those places where Zhang Yu would conduct his daily activities. And the roads that he would pass by frequently. Do you mean? Xia Ping became nervous. It's better to be safe than sorry. Situ. His solemnness was unparalleled. Xia Ping had never seen him so serious before. If we compare this with what's happening overseas. But if it leads to a scourge, then it is as it seems. The Federal Empire had not endured any foreign attacks or assaults for at least 100 years. With their imposing might, order and stability in the region had been defended. However, trouble had never ceased abroad. Countless tragedies had been caused by those people. Beyond the Federal Empire, demons were rampant. Lunatics, perverts, and butchers were constantly being bred among the hungry, poor, and desperate. They made it into the news several times every year. These were some of the reasons why Situ He actually supported what the Datong Party advocated. Under current circumstances, it was impossible for the Federal Empire to gloriously isolate themselves and stand alone. If the outside world wasn't cleaned up, the people of the empire would never be safe. This incident involving Zhang Yu had further confirmed Situ He's perspective on this matter. The reason was simple. A dignified blackguard had been distorted into a demon. This was certainly not something that a fortuitous meeting or a single individual could accomplish. Behind this, something evil must be there. It must be uprooted and swept away. Got it. Xia Ping nodded. I just asked someone to get you Zhang Yu's activity routes and schedules as soon as possible. An hour later, Situ He got his hands on a report on Zhang Yu's daily activities. Looking at the report, Situ He became silent. Because purely studying the trajectory of Zhang Yu's daily activities, this deputy director of the Blackguard's Guangnan branch seemed as if he was truly an exemplar for the Federal Empire. He had no bad habits. He never partook in messy dinner parties. Nor was there any evidence hinting that he had more frequent interactions with so-and-so in private. There was also no sign of bribery or corruption. All the evidence seemed to show that this person would go to work on time, go off work at a fixed time, and would occasionally work overtime. Outside working hours, he would read books, sleep, and exercise in his private apartment. Everyone's testimony showed that this man was easygoing and generous in his attitude. His trajectory as recorded by all the instruments proved that this person had never lingered too long outside his apartment or the blackguard's offices. He would rarely even use his salary or his bank card. If it hadn't been that his corpse was right under the collapsed basement, and the many shreds of evidence extracted from his body that had already changed into a tiger demon. And, in particular, that his distorted tiger claws were a complete match with the claw prints left on the scenes of the other tiger demon cases. If it weren't for all these things, based solely on the evidence in these papers, this blackguard officer seemed to be more in line with the Federal Empire's definition of a gentleman than almost anyone else. Unready, not lustful, prompt in action, and prudent in speech. Situ He got angrier as he went on. He discarded the report and ordered Xia Ping to report to him. Prepare a car. I'm going to walk through Zhang Yu's trajectories myself. I refuse to believe that there's no flaw at all. In the afternoon, the temperature began to rise. Outside the store, eggs could almost be cooked on the sidewalk. But it was still cool inside the bookstore. Ling Pinyin was immersed in a battle in the rift. Although it was still a stomp. His opponents always got trolled. And his teammates were always being carried by him. He felt really great when he was playing. His gaming experience was particularly good. Who doesn't like to win? It was just that after putting down his phone, Ling Pinyin always felt a little empty. Should I write a chapter? At this moment, a small car drove by slowly outside the door. Ling Pinyin heard the sound and glanced outside. An official state car. Looks pretty posh. Has some VIP arrived? Ling Pinyin sighed as he watched the small, uniquely shaped car being driven outside the store. Sitting in the back seat, Situ He looked at the shops and public facilities outside the car window. The facilities in the East City district needs refurbishment, he said. Yes, sir. Xia Ping, who was driving for him, smiled and said, plans have already been made. In the next 3 years, a $1 billion investment will be used to transform the area. Jianxi Road, where the blackguard's office is located, will be among the first batch of streets to be renovated. This area will come next, okay? Situ he nodded without saying anything. All of a sudden, his eyes lit on an old shop on the corner. Its dilapidated sign distracted him. When he'd regained his senses, the car had already been driven several hundred feet away. Stop! Situ he ordered immediately. Xia Ping stopped the car and asked, "What's the matter?" Situ he turned his head and looked behind him. He gently stroked the thumb ring he was wearing on his left hand. Click, click, the thumb ring which was made of jade shattered and fell into his palm. Situ he became solemn. Xia Ping also sensed something. Is there something wrong? Situ he pondered for a long time. Finally, he said to Xia Ping, "Continue driving." His eyes, however, remained fixed on the shop behind him. Although he couldn't feel anything abnormal, his thumb ring wouldn't lie. Because it was a thumb ring that had been made by the governor, and it was only issued to blackguards of the general rank. The thumb ring had only one function: detecting abnormal psionic reactions. And now it had fallen apart. If it hadn't been for the ring shattering, Situ he knew that he might have remained completely oblivious to the fact that unusual psionic energy existed in the place which he had passed by just now. Xia Ping didn't understand what was happening and continued to drive forward. "Interesting, Situ," he said. "What did you discover?" Xia Ping asked. "Just keep on driving." Situ he said. "Don't ask too many questions." Situ he was aware that there must be some powerful people or objects in this street. The other party was deliberately concealing himself. If it hadn't been that he was carrying the governor's special thumb ring, this would have slipped by him too. "I'll come and get you tonight," Situ he said to himself. Situ he was very confident that he could purge and eliminate all demons or foreign species that might threaten the Federal Empire. Of course, if the other party bore no ill intentions toward the Federal Empire, then he wouldn't go the extreme of exterminating them.